All right, everybody can hear me, right? All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming to listen to me speak. My name is Elena Matchey. I am head of analytics strategy at Netscope. My background is in analytics. I've spent about 15 years working in analytics in various industries, most recently information security. And what I wanted to do today is share with you my expertise and my kind of impressions of what analytics can do for organizations. I've worked with hundreds of information security organizations, helping them find the value of their data. And that's some of what I wanted to share with you today. What I want to start out by saying is that I think as I worked with organizations in their data, in information security, I've observed that most individuals, most organizations inherently understand that data-driven decisions are the best kind of decisions. We should be using our data and analytics to find value. But when it comes to doing so, many folks get overwhelmed. You know, organizations see the masses of data in front of them. It can feel like an ocean of data. And folks, a lot of the times ask me, like, what am I supposed to do with this, right? How do I wade into this water? Should I even bother? Because it's a lot, and it's unclear what we're going to get out of it. And so many organizations I see don't invest in much in that data space. But I wanted to kind of share with you what I've seen organizations gain when they wade that ocean, kind of so to speak, the treasure that they find underneath. And it's quite valuable. And my other observation is that if you're not doing it, your adversaries and your competitors are. So it's a really important to do this to get ahead. In this session today, I wanted to talk about examples of what I see organizations doing creatively with their analytics in information security and in use cases that are relevant to I think, many of you, and why that's so valuable. And then at the end, I would like to discuss a framework for getting started. If you're looking to get started in this, how do we get started to gain this value? One note I want to make is many of you might associate your data and analytics with your SIM, right? Many organizations use a SIM that holds much of their data. And so I wanted to kind of talk about this because SIMs are a great starting place, but also my observations have been that the use cases in the SIM space have typically been focused on doing things like threat hunting, or they're focused on compliance, and we mean compliance, we mean dumping all of our logs there for retention purposes, and then user investigations. But I think it can be so much more than this, right? We can get a lot more out of this. So at a high level, what have I seen analytics do for organizations? What can it do for your organizations? Number one is the discovery of your environment and identifying risk. If you centralize your data in a single location, you can effectively gain an understanding in what your organization looks like, what risks and security gaps exist, what does the attack surface look like. And we'll see examples of that. The second thing it does, and SIMs do this, right? They allow you to investigate, to dive into a particular trend or anomaly and get contextual data around this to see, hey, why do I have a spike in user alerts? Is it a particular user? Is it a particular application? Why did this thing happen? The third area is around monitoring your control. So if you, in the first part, discovered a security gap or a gap in your organization, and you put in a control around it, how can you be sure that that control is working? Is it generating a lot of false positives? Is it doing the thing it said it would do? Again, where analytics comes in and helps us, and we'll see examples of this. And finally, it helps us demonstrate value. So many organizations have to tell their leadership, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm achieving, right? How do we go beyond qualitative examples? How do we actually show that we're proving that value? And another reason that this is important is if we're not only trying to verify that our controls are working and demonstrate that to leadership, but also if we have something that we're trying to implement that is getting pushback from our business, other business units in the organization, we can use analytics to demonstrate the severity of the situation, why it needs to be addressed. So those are the 4 areas. The ones that I'm going to really focus on today really fall in the space of discovery in your environment and monitoring your controls over here, although the elements of the other 2 will be shown as well. So let's talk about kind of some of the analytics around, do I have a problem in the organization? And the first example we'll start out with is, where is the sensitive data? I think many of you might be in organizations that are in the healthcare space or in financial space or really whatever it is. And if you are, then you're having to protect sensitive data in your organizations. That is one of the core responsibilities you have as part of the security team. And so that might be data like personal health information, PHR, or it could be personally identifiable information, PII, PCI for the payment card industry and so forth. It could be just, hey, the secret sauce in the organization needs to be protected. So if you're in charge of protecting this data, one of the first questions you may ask is, well, where is that data located in my organization? What repositories is this data sitting in? Because once you know that, you can put in controls, or you can ensure that the proper controls are in place. So with that, if we gather our telemetry and logs and analysis, this is some of what we can do with this data. So on the screen, what you'll see is a Sankey diagram. I personally love Sankey diagrams in the security space because they're a great way to show relationships between things, and also they're a great way to communicate a particular message. And so to just walk you through, if you haven't seen one, what we have here on the left-hand side is we have the data classification of particular objects in our organization. So we can see PII, PCI, other sensitive data, confidential, same thing on this side, right? You can see the data classification here. And on the right-hand side, what you see are the applications or repositories where we are finding this data. So you can see these over here. So you can see there's sensitive data that's being found in OneDrive for Business, and Box, and Google Drive, and Microsoft Teams, and so on and so forth, all of these applications. And if we highlight a particular maybe data classification that's important to us, PCI in this case, we can see basically the volume of the data and its location. So you can see, I think we started out with 497 objects there, and hey, the majority of them are sitting in OneDrive for Business. But then we see some other ones over here in these applications, and this is where we can start to make decisions and think about things. Do we have, for example, the appropriate controls, the audit controls that we need to protect this data in these repositories? And if we don't, should we consolidate and move data out? For example, we might decide that, you know what, G Drive is not something we use in this organization and should definitely not hold sensitive data. So this is kind of what we can learn. And based on this, we can decide what we need to do about it. And we're going to come back to this example later on, so just keep that in your mind. And let's go to another one, a similar one. We talked about where is data sitting, but you might also be interested to understand where is sensitive data coming from and where is sensitive data going. And so I'm sorry this ended up being a little bit of an eye chart, but again, another Sankey diagram where what we're looking at is the relationship between the source application and source instance. By the way, for different people might call this different thing, but what we're talking about for source instance is if I'm using OneDrive for Business, am I using my company's source instance or a personal instance that somebody just spun up or some partner, right? And so what we're looking at here is sensitive data coming from source applications and source instances. You can't see that, you might not see this, but this is OneDrive for Business and SharePoint and Box. And these are Caliber Insurance instances. So we know that we're going to pretend we're Caliber Insurance, and this is where our sensitive data is, and where is it going? The middle column tells us the file type. So we see documents and images and maybe some other proprietary file types, spreadsheets and PDFs. And so what we can do is, again, we can kind of focus in on one specific file type. Perhaps we're interested in spreadsheets because those can hold a lot of customer records and those can hold a lot of patient records, and maybe we're interested where those are going. And so you can see in this highlighted path, we started out with this data coming from a source application of Box and OneDrive for Business, and it's a Caliber Insurance, great, that's fine, but then where is it going? And so what you can see where it's going is it's going in gmail.com, in Facebook, in WeTransfer, and in G Drive, right? And for the Google Suite, right, it's the gmail.com instance. That means it's a personal instance. So again, here we can start to observe, hey, there is data moving. It's our sensitive data. It's moving to another place that looks like we don't own. Do we need to be concerned? What decisions do we make about that? And so this is the first step of understanding gaps and issues I may need to address, depending on my risk appetite. Let's go to a different example. Okay, there we go. So, AI is everywhere, so you can't have a presentation without mentioning ChatGPT and AI. I think I counted 5 presentations on the topic of AI in this conference, but you see it everywhere. But hey, it's a topic that's on top of mind for many organizations. So I hear a lot of organizations asking the question like, hey, are our employees using generative AI in our environment, right? And how are they using that? And is it something we should be concerned about? So again, this is something where analytics can really help us out. So for example, we can learn that, hey, 13% of our organization is using AI because we see where people are going and what websites and applications they're accessing. So we can take a look and say, hey, 13% of our users are accessing AI. Okay, well, that might be interesting. But which AI applications are they using might be another question we ask. So here in this view, I don't know if you can see it, but it's application on the y-axis and the number of events on the x-axis and over here, right? And so we can see like, hey, there's ChatGPT by far and OpenAI, they basically the same thing. That by far is the majority of the applications we see used. But it's not the only one. There's plenty of other ones here, and even ones that we didn't realize or didn't really think of AI as AI applications, but are leveraging AI are here, and so that gives us this new visibility to say, hey, it's not just ChatGPT that we need to think about. We need to think about all of these other applications. And So the other thing that comes into play here is the question of, are our users just browsing AI applications, or are they sending sensitive data there? Because that's the biggest concern with AI applications. Like, we want all of our organization to leverage tools to make them be more productive and more efficient, but we want to ensure that they're doing this in a safe way, that they're not, for example, entering a patient information to say, write me a patient letter, ChatGPT, right, with this patient's name and health condition. We want to make sure we're not sending that kind of data. We want to make sure that if we're using this to do source code optimization, that we don't, by mistake, send our intellectual property into these tools. So that's the concern there. And so the question that comes out of there is, how is our population using these applications? What are they doing? And so again, I'll point it out, guys, I think. We have a legend here at the bottom that says, what is the activity that users are performing in this? Are they browsing over here, this like light blue right here, or logging in, deleting, or are they posting, the red, right? The red over here. This is the post activity. That's something we want to be concerned about, because that shows that users are actually querying the systems and not just checking it out. Right? And so again, the other question we might want to get clarity into, like, is this like a one-type hype thing? Maybe people use the AI in our organization a little bit back in April when all of this really started blowing up. Or is it a consistent trend? And this is what this is meant to show you. We have users on the right. Let me switch to this one so we're not. Users on the right and how many there are, and across the bottom is time. And so we can see, hey, at the beginning of June we had 131 users. By mid-September we had 300. We have more than doubled in our organization the usage of AI. And so what this tells us is, we've asked a bunch of questions about AI usage. We've got some answers. Now we can start to make decisions about whether or not we need to put in some controls around this. And if we do put in controls, how we can verify that they are doing what we want them to do. And so again, we'll come back to this example in a few minutes when we're talking about verifying and monitoring our controls and using analytics to get clarity on that. Just looking at time check. It's not. Yeah, there we go. So another question: which users pose a risk in our organization? Kind of similar to the user investigation question, but what we might want to know is, holistically, using all of our controls and alerting capability, how do we look at that in sum and see who are the top risky users? And this is another example of that. There we go. So here what we're looking at is the number of users, in the organization. And these are the top risky users and the number of risky events that they have performed in our environment. So we can see, like, hey, maybe this is a group of people we need to really focus on. Maybe they need some security training. Maybe they need a talking to from HR. I don't know. But we can see this data, but then we can also combine this data contextually with what they are doing, right? So we can see, again, what is the risky behavior that they are performing, and we can really start to understand that. And if we highlight a single user over here, this Matchey, you can guess who that is, you can start to see, like, hey, this person is doing a whole lot of uploading to unsanctioned applications that are not being managed by IT. And we can see that this user is hitting mal sites and moving sensitive data to places where it shouldn't go, and hitting malware and doing bulk uploads and ignoring coaching. And we'll talk about coaching in a minute if folks aren't familiar with that. So this is something else we can do. And what I want to stress is, so far we've talked about a lot of security-related use cases. But this really goes beyond security. And I think that as security professionals, as security teams, you're focused on doing, kind of this, protecting the company. But increasingly, security teams can drive the business, right? Can help the business improve overall. And so, for example, to kind of combine this with another topic, your organizations, I'm sure, are constantly being pressured budget-wise, and to kind of, hey, how do you justify your budget? And so this is one area where analytics can help you, because you can ask questions like this: are there application consolidation opportunities in my environment? So if we think about situations like, what applications are in use? Hey, there's lots of different business units. They're all kind of spinning up their own, they're using their credit card to buy licenses to applications. Can we do something better to improve the environment as a result of that? So here, here what we have is a visual where we've used analytics to look at the applications we identify in the organizations based on category. So you can see categories over here on the left-hand side. We can see collaboration, cloud storage, business process, generative AI, and all of that. So we can see all these categories, and then we can start to think about, hey, why do we have 27 applications that are in the cloud storage category? And do we need all those, and are we paying for them? And by the way, I'll just highlight, there's another color here. The purple are the IT managed applications. The blue are the ones that people bought with their credit cards or just using for free. So you can kind of see that. This is very common, by the way. This is the rule, not the exception. Most applications in use that you see, now they might not have your sensitive data moving them to, but when I look at organizations, they'll be leveraging thousands of applications. Only about a couple hundred are used, are something that the IT team manages or the third-party risk team manages. So, but in any case, so we can dive into that detail, and we can say, what's the 23, what's the 14? I think I looked at the 23, or maybe all of them. In any case, you can see what makes up those applications. You can see, hey, yeah, Amazon S3, Google Drive, Box, GCP, and all of these applications. And then we can start to make decisions. We can start to think about, all right, maybe these applications, the Google Drive, the Box, the Dropbox, the OneDrive, maybe we consolidate those into a single application that the entire organization should be using, right? And maybe we look at to see if there's any risky applications, FileZilla, TransferNow, Pastebin, and, I don't want to pick on applications, but maybe we think about, hey, our organization should not be using these in general. Maybe we think about blocking those applications. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. The other interesting kind of use case in this realm, again, goes beyond security, and there's more of these, but I included two. But this one is interesting because this is like a story that was told to me about an organization that I worked with, and this is the question here is, what is the usage of a particular application in my environment? And in this organization, a CIO came to us and said, a vendor reached out to me and they said, I'm using, this application, application ABC, that my employees are using this application, and that, hey, we detect, between 78 and 143 users of this application, and do you want to buy a license to this application since your users are actually using it? And so here the CIO was thinking well, do I trust this data? Is this true? How do I know that this is actually the case? And what is the nuance behind that? So again, this is where you can use your analytics, your own analytics, to verify this data. And so here, how do we better understand actual usage? So are there really 78 users in May and so forth? And yeah, so this is where we can actually use our own data to understand how many users do we have in an application on a given time period, per week, per day, per month. Here we happen to look at the data at a per day basis and the number of users on the y-axis, and we can see, okay, typically we have like 1, 2, in the single digits, sometimes 12 users per month. Now maybe altogether that adds up to 78 unique users or 143, but it gives us that additional information, especially if this is like a concurrent license type of situation. Maybe we don't need that many licenses, and maybe we don't really even need to use this application. It doesn't look like the usage might be too low for us to consider buying this. But the other important thing that we can combine this with is the type of activity that's being performed in these applications. So, okay, maybe we have 78 users, but what are they doing in this application? And if most of the activity is a login attempt or a browse, then maybe that's not real usage. Maybe it's just somebody going to this website, but they're not actually using the application. And so again, this, you can say, okay, 26 users are doing uploads. All right, so 26 users seem to be having a more significant usage of this application. And then you can start to make your decisions from there. So that's just another example of how do we take information presented to us, how do we use our own data to verify and get additional context around this. All right, so we talked a little bit about how we can use analytics to see what's happening in our organization and identify gaps, but then the other part that I really wanted to talk about is how do we verify that the problem is being solved with analytics? And so I'm going to bring us back to that example where we talked about PCI data and the fact that it's showing up in Google Drive, and that we don't have the appropriate controls, audits, and compliance measures there to house that data. It shouldn't be there. So of course, what we can do is we can start to apply controls, and we can say, okay, we're going to block that. That's not going to happen anymore. We're going to put in a policy, no sensitive data in G Drive. But then how do we show that that's actually happening? Our auditors are going to be like, well, show me that that's true. And so we can rerun this analysis now, same thing we saw before. And now we can say, okay, PCI data, where is it? Well, it's in OneDrive, Box, Microsoft Teams, blah, 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 but it's not in G Drive. Okay, so we see that. So it's not there. It's not sitting there. But then is it going there is another question. Like, how do we show that it's going there? So here, another example where we have, so we see here we're showing the movement. We have PCI data and the number of objects. We see that there is an activity here of upload, so somebody's attempting to upload PCI data. And then we're looking to see where it's being uploaded. OneDrive, G Drive, over here. So we're trying to upload to G Drive and these other places. So then if we go and highlight this path, we can see people are attempting to upload data 102 times, but they are getting blocked. So it's not getting there. So this is kind of where we can show compliance, and we can show that this is working. Okay. Hold on a second. I wanted to bring us back to our AI conversation and the situation with the posts, right? So we have concerns. We see that people are posting data. We want to enable our business, not disable our business. We want to protect our environment. What do we do? It's possible for us to leverage tools and solutions that allow us to not just outright block and allow certain activity, but to gently coach our users, right? Because we want to have certainty around this information. So if we were to leverage coaching, real-time coaching capabilities. This is where we can help our users make the right decision, but also not disable them. So these can be used to say, hey, if you do this activity, are you sure you want to do this, or this is not allowed? But it can also say, hey, we don't really recommend you doing this, or we don't want you to send sensitive data to these applications, so just be careful about that. And also, by the way, what are you trying to do here anyway? What's your justification for using AI applications? So let's say we put in controls like that. What could we see out of that? The first thing we can see, and we see many organizations benefiting from a view like this, because this is a simple trend diagram, but this is a coaching policy alerts. So we put in real-time coaching policy. We'll do a time check, yeah. And we see that, hey, at the start of this in September, we had 500 users who are triggering this policy, and they're getting a real-time coaching messages. And then out of those, roughly, maybe 300 are saying, hey, we're going to stop this action, and 300 are saying, we're going to proceed. And the sum doesn't have to be exactly equal, because this can happen to a single user multiple times, and we're counting users. So what we see here, right, is we see a very nice decline in the number of policies that are being triggered. So we see this policy is running, but what this is showing to us is that users are learning a new behavior. They're learning that, hey, maybe they shouldn't be using this application, maybe they should not be, maybe there's a different way of doing some of this. The other thing we can do, back to my favorite sand keys, is we can look to see what is happening now when users are trying to access ChatGPT, for example. So I forgot my label, so excuse me, but these are applications. This is the activity being performed. This is the policy that's being hit. And this is the policy action that's occurring. So what you can see is that users, there's some amount of traffic for ChatGPT. And you can see some of that traffic is a post. Some of it is a login attempt. Some of it delete, download, whatever, all of these activities. The posts are the ones that we're concerned about. And we see that the post activity is triggering two policies. Block sensitive data posted to Gen AI. And all of that, whenever that happens, so whenever somebody tries to post sensitive data to ChatGPT, there's a straight up block of that information. But whenever anybody is using ChatGPT just in general with no sensitive data, there is a coach, inline coaching that occurs as saying, are you using this safely? Are you using this the right way? And you're giving users a choice. Okay. So those are some examples. Oh, whoops, I guess I should have done that. Oh, and then finally, the final thing is, if users are entering justifications, then you can also use analytics on that data to understand what users are doing this, why they're doing this, and if there are business needs that you need to help facilitate for your users, right? So we can see things like creating a strategy deck content. Okay, maybe strategy deck content shouldn't be pasted into Gen AI sites, but then drafting patient insurance letter, also problematic, but then translation needed, using it to fine-tune my media posts. Maybe those things are okay, or maybe we need to provide a safer way for our users to translate their data. Okay. So those are some examples. I wanted to next kind of get into to talk about where do we start and how do we get started. I think we can talk for hours about this topic. So today I wanted to give you all a framework to start with. And I think the guiding principles of this framework, right, when we're trying to deal with something overwhelming like this, an ocean of data in front of us, it's important to think about low-hanging fruit first, to go for what's easy, what's manageable, without diving into building out complex solutions, and then iterating over time. So to give you a flow of this, kind of a flow chart around this. The first step is to identify your problem and what questions you need answered. And that might be intimidating by itself because, well, what questions do I need to answer? Potentially some of what I showed you today inspired you to think about some of the things you need to answer. But I think that the problems and the questions you start to ask and answer should be related to your biggest risks and what is keeping you up at night, right? Like if this is where you need to start and say, oh, like what is the most important thing for me to protect, right? We start with those questions. So if we were to go with an example, maybe the question that we ask is sensitive data being exfiltrated in my organization? Maybe that's kind of the question I need to answer with data. And so if that's the question you're going for, the next item to decide is identify what data you have available to answer your question and if you have the right data. So for example, we might discover that we have data movement data available. So we can see data moving from location X to location Y. But then do we, as an organization, have we defined what our sensitive data is? And are there processes to look for, classify, and log that data? The answer to those things might be no. And so then what do we do then? If the answer is no, and this is the question, well, one thing you do is you get better data, right? So you develop a DLP program, data loss prevention program, where you define those assets and you put logging controls in place, right? But you don't have to stop everything and just work on that. In parallel, what you should be thinking about is asking and answering a different question, right? So we might not know that the sensitive data is moving, but then maybe a different question that we can answer is there data moving to non-corporate applications and how much? And we saw examples of that earlier. So we might not know it's sensitive data, but if we know that there are 100 gigabytes of data moving to WeTransfer, that gives us fuel to communicate to our leadership to say, hey, there's this stuff moving out and we don't know what it is, so we really need to develop that DLP program and start to classify our data. So that's kind of the step there. And then once we do get better data, right, we go back up to that funnel, and maybe now we've developed our DLP program and we put we do our analysis, and now we can answer that question. So what I'm trying to say with all this is it's an iterative approach based on what you have and where you need to get to. And just because you might not have the maturity to answer the question you want to answer, but you can answer a different question as you work on your maturity model. And that's what I wanted to talk to you today about, and I hope that was useful. And I welcome any questions. I think we have some time to answer any questions. 10 minutes. Yes?
So the risk appetite differs based on what you're working on, what data you're dealing with. But so there's always going to be a variable factor. But what are some basic common factors that involved in your risk appetite to present the intelligence process?
You mean how do you determine what the risk?
The common factors that basically play a major role when you determine your risk appetite.
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, and I'm not a risk expert, but I've spoken to some, and kind of the thought process that goes in there is what could we lose that would cause us damage, right? And how much of that could we lose? And how much if we lost, so for example, if our data was compromised, if we lost patient records and we have to pay a fine on that, how much can we tolerate in financial loss, but then also in reputational loss, which is not a number, right? But what is the reputational loss that we can tolerate? So maybe we can tolerate losing 100 records, I don't know, in a given time period. I'm just completely making this up, but like a year. We can lose 100 records per year. But we certainly can't lose 1 million. And so we weigh that against some of our other types of data. The other way of thinking about these, like these examples, these risk examples, how much could we tolerate that the billing system goes down versus the patient care system goes down, right? The patient care system that's responsible for my appointments to an at-risk population, that's much more important than the billing system. So those are the types of decisions you're going through. I don't know if I answered your questions. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Well, I'm not going to talk about that. So you need the source data, you need the logging control. So what is going to give you that information and that telemetry, right? What is going to do your data classification systems, like, for example, and what's going to identify where your sensitive data is sitting, right? So CASB solutions that identify data at rest, that was our first example. Looking at, those are API protection solutions. The data movement scenarios was inline data movement, so CASB there again, but it could be many other products like cloud firewalls and private application, NPA, CTNA, those types of things. So you need the products that will give you that telemetry. What's in your SIM? Maybe you already have it from your other solutions. So those. Does that help? Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, so when you're looking for sensitive data, it's about tuning. And many solutions now are leveraging ML and AI to do those things. So I would say looking there. But I would say that, and I hesitate to go further with an answer to that question. So, but thank you for asking, and I will think about it. Yes, over here. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Right, I do. Right, you can rely on your users to classify the data, but the examples that I was referencing are all based on detecting what the actual data is. Yes, DLP insight. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, it could be also multiple classifications. This is what we see, right? That this file actually has PHI, PCI. It's like, if it's a patient record, it can have potentially many different types of. I keep going to the medical examples because they're easy, but this applies in the financial, many different industries. Yeah. And yeah? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. what data they have available to them.
Or potential data to get.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so my approach, and I don't know that this will answer your question, typically if you ask an open-ended question to a person, they may not know what to answer, right? So I typically like to throw out something, like a spaghetti on the wall, to say, here's an example, and then you can gauge their level based on their answer. Do they know what that is? Do they not know what that is? Do I go high level? Do I go lower level? But I typically, when I'm engaged in a new situation and I don't have much to go on, I will show them something. And I will say, what do you think of this? Or, is this a system that you use? And then we will go from there. Again, it's an iterative discovery process. Yeah.
So analytics, charts, safety diagrams, bar charts, line charts, phase charts, we don't want that. I'm curious. I was maybe you showed us what do you consider visualization? Or is it probably always get something when you say this is what these conferences every house is.
Well, are you asking me about the visualizations or the visualizations? Keep it simple, stupid is the best approach. I love sand keys, but you see I had to explain them to you. So they're good for relationships, but bar charts, line charts, and tables. You really don't need any more than that. Like sometimes I see, maybe I threw out some colors to kind of grab your attention, and you can do that. But most of the time, it will confuse people, and just a simple line chart, a simple bar chart, and a table with all the detailed, for the detail-oriented people, because in our industry, I don't know, it's all detail-oriented, because if you show somebody a line trend or a bar chart, they're going to be like, why is that up high? Oh, here's a table that gives you all the detail behind that. So those are the three. There's no clear answer on that because it speaks to what does a CISO want to see, or that CISOs have told me they want to see? They want to know how are they doing, good, bad, or in between, and how are they trending? Are they improving or are they getting worse? And what do they need to be concerned about? So for different CISOs and different leaders, that will be different things. So that's what you need to go for. Are we good, bad? How are we trending? And what do we need to do next? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.